everyone. Welcome back to After Dark. I am your host, Laura B. If you haven't listened to last week's episode yet, you might want to before you listen to this one. I am doing a deep dive into Casey Anthony, and this is the second part out of most likely 3 or 4 parts. With that being said, let's jump right in. Last week, we went over how Casey's parents met and their lives before meeting each other. We talked about how they enable their daughter Casey and cover for her so they look like the perfect family and never hold her accountable for anything that she does wrong. We talked about some of the lies Casey has told. There will be more. And we stopped right after she had given birth to her daughter, Caylee Marie Anthony. The first person to hold Caylee after she was born was not Casey. It was her mother, Cindy. George gave the excuse that it was because Casey was getting stitched up and the doctor wouldn't let her hold her, even though all of us mamas know this isn't true. The first thing they do is skin to skin with the mother, usually. All in all, Casey was not happy about it and made a comment about not being able to hold her own baby. Things got worse from there. Cindy would often refer to herself as Caylee's mom. One quote from Cindy when Caylee was learning to talk said, "Once in a great while, I might have to ask what she's talking about, but you learn your child's speech." There were often times that George would also refer to Cindy as mommy when talking to Caylee. As Caylee became a toddler and started walking, she would run to George and Cindy as if they were her parents. Casey felt she was a surrogate for Cindy to have a baby. After that, there was no more need for her. It made her resentful of the relationship Caylee had with her parents. George and Cindy make it seem that Casey was just ungrateful when they were trying to help give Caylee a stable home. That may be partly true because Casey did like to have all the attention on her, so she may have been somewhat jealous of Caylee. But I do believe in the process of helping give Caylee a stable home, they were going too far by having Caylee call Cindy mommy. Casey was only 19 when she had Caylee. Instead of helping Casey to be a good mom and teaching her things that she needed to know, Cindy mostly would criticize everything she did when it involved Caylee. On more than one occasion, Cindy had threatened Casey that she was going to get custody of Caylee. Casey would do just about anything to keep her from them. After Casey had Caylee, her and Jesse got back together. He asked for a paternity test and 6 weeks later got the results. It was what he knew in his heart all along. Caylee was not biologically his daughter. At this point, Jesse was attached to Caylee and loved her as if she were his own. That's how he wanted to raise her, as his own. Casey and Caylee spent a lot of time at Jesse's house. Jesse's father said they all loved Caylee. He said, quote, "She was pure joy, innocent and perfect." Jesse said, quote, "Caylee could light up the room." On New Year's Eve of 2005, Jesse proposed to Casey. He said this about Casey, quote, "She geared her life strictly around how she was going to be a mother first, wife second, and everything else third. That was her goal, her intention." Then Casey changed. She stopped being dedicated to those things and started being a partier and hanging out with the wrong people. She was not a responsible mother to a beautiful little girl anymore. End quote. What could have changed? Casey was a good mother in the beginning. Caylee was well dressed, clean, fed, and taken care of. Her room at the Anthony house was decorated in Winnie the Pooh, and she had a playhouse in the backyard. Casey was very attentive to her daughter. She never rose her voice to her. She constantly played with Caylee. When Casey came home from work, the first thing she would do is find her daughter and shower her with hugs and kisses. Little Caylee had a huge personality. She was friendly and loved making people laugh. She loved wearing big hats and sunglasses. Everywhere she went, she carried a book with her. She loved Dora the Explorer and could count to 40 in Spanish at the age of 2. After maternity leave, Casey told everyone she was going back to her job at Universal. She left every day and returned home every night. Little did anyone know, Casey had been terminated from the job in April of 2006 for not returning after maternity leave. They had tried multiple times to get a hold of her and she wouldn't return their calls. When Casey would leave for work, she would leave Caylee with different people. If she was working days, she would leave her with George, since he didn't go to work until 3 in the afternoon. Other times, she would have different friends watch her, or sometimes Jesse Grun's family would keep her. There was one friend, if that is what you want to call her, that often watched Caylee for Casey. I don't believe anyone is Casey's friend. She may be their friend, but she only keeps them around as long as it benefits her. Anyway, Casey had manipulated a girl, Lauren Gibbs, into babysitting for her for free. They had been friends since middle school. Casey told her some sob story about how she was working two, yes, two jobs now, Universal and now Sports Authority. Lauren felt bad for her friend. She knew it had to be tough to work two jobs and then go home and take care of a baby without the support of a partner. So Lauren told Casey she would be happy to help her out and watch Caylee for her at no charge. That is, until one day Lauren was trying to get a hold of Casey, but she wasn't answering her cell phone. So Lauren called Sports Authority and was told that no one by the name of Casey Anthony worked there. Casey had been using Lauren while she went and hung out with her friends. To no one's surprise, that was the end of Lauren's friendship with Casey. In May of 2006, Casey broke off her engagement with Jesse Grund. Here she had someone who, despite all of her lies and deceit, still loved her and accepted her daughter as his own. But she dumped him because she said he loved Caylee more than her. Then, to stomp on his heart some more, she told him they could be friends and he could still be in Caylee's life, just not as her father. How cold hearted and selfish can you be? He was the only father Caylee had known in her 9 months on this earth, and Jesse had been there from the beginning. But because of her jealousy, Caylee would no longer have a father figure in her life. Casey worried about how Casey felt, and that's it. She had no regards for anyone else's feelings, including her own daughter. Jesse didn't talk to Casey for about 10 months after the breakup. She had broke his heart. Around this time is when Casey started partying. Being a parent had gotten old really fast. She started hanging around the wrong people. People who wanted to party every night and that had no kids themselves. Casey was able to keep up with this new lifestyle because she had her parents to use as a crutch. She knew no matter what, they would always be there for Caylee. For the rest of 2006, Casey continued her lie of going to two jobs. If she needed money for something, she would just steal it from whoever was convenient at the time, usually Cindy, Amy, or George. She would leave Caylee with friends during the day and with her parents in the evening. She would make up random things she had to do, such as inventory after hours, so she could stay out late partying with her friends. One day, George decided to surprise Casey at work and take her out to lunch. He went to the Sports Authority around lunchtime and asked an employee if he could get Casey for him. The employee had no clue who he was talking about. A manager happened to be standing close by and told George there was no one by that name who worked there, nor had there ever been. Later that day, when George saw Casey, he asked her about what he was told, and she said they must have been new and didn't know who she was. George believed this and let the subject go. Cindy didn't like the fact that George was checking up on Casey. She didn't want Casey to get upset. Cindy enabled Casey and taught her to ignore things rather than face them. Cindy claims to not have seen what a master manipulator her daughter was. Here is what Cindy had to say about Casey's behavior. Quote, Casey was good at covering her tracks, which we found out later. There were signs looking back now, but I didn't realize it until it was too late. End quote. Cindy absolutely knew her daughter was a liar and a manipulator. She and George taught her everything she knew about the subject. They just liked to deny things, just like Casey did and still does. 2006 ended with Casey constantly partying. 2007 became more of the same. She spent most of 2007 partying and talking to different men online. First, there was Chris Stutz. He lived in Tallahassee. They met at a football game once and then dated for a while. But Casey didn't like the long distance thing. Next was Brandon Snow. At one point, she had lied to him and told him she was pregnant with his child so that he wouldn't deploy to Iraq. He went anyway, and on Valentine's Day, she told him she lost the baby. He never believed any of it. On March 19th, 2007, Casey and her friends went to a club for her 21st birthday. One of the pics that is floating around with Casey's head in the toilet is from that night, even though people are saying it's from during the time Caylee was missing. During the spring of 2007, Casey told everyone that she got a promotion at her fake job. Universal Studios made her an event planner. This worked out well for Casey. All she had to do was tell her parents she got a call about an event setup and that they needed her there and she would be out the door. She made her job sound very important and made it seem that no one else could handle setting up events unless Casey was there to direct them. She put so much work into this fake job. It seemed exhausting. It probably would have been easier just to go get a real one. Casey worked hard to keep up the appearance of having this job. Quite frankly, she created fake emails and sent herself messages to show her parents. Thomas Frank, Gabe Marsh, Michael Hamilton, Cheryl Davis, and Juliette Lewis. These were all the names of people to whom Casey was sending emails and also receiving them to make it look like she had this job. All of these people were fake, except for Cheryl Davis, and it had been years since she worked at Universal. An example of an email from Cheryl Davis to Casey is thanking Casey and her coworkers for the great work they did on the Battle of the Bands event at Universal. Another email from Gabe Marsh lets Casey know that they will definitely need her to work on May 14th. Casey also told her parents around the time of her promotion that she was dating someone new, a man named Jeff Hopkins, who she said also worked at Universal. She said he had a son a year older than Caylee. She told her parents a lot of details about Jeff. She said he was very wealthy and established. He was originally from North Carolina, and his mother, Jules, had cancer. Jeff also had a nanny for his son. Her name was Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. It was shortly after this that Casey started telling people that Zanny the nanny was watching Caylee also. Casey very rarely told her parents about the boyfriend she had. So when she told them about Jeff, they were excited to meet him. Cindy planned 2 times for Jeff to come over for dinner so they could meet him, but there was an excuse both times. The first time he was sick, and the second time he was called into work. Shortly after this, Casey says they broke up because he left Florida and neither could do a long distance relationship. In case you haven't figured it out already, Jeff was a real person this time. However, he is someone Casey went to school with back in middle and high school, and she hadn't seen or talked to him for years. According to Casey, her and Jeff remained friends after they quit dating. Jeff was even nice enough to talk to his nanny, Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, about watching Caylee for Casey while she worked, and he even paid for the services for a while. There are a lot of times Casey tells people Caylee is with Zenaida, even though we know the story about Jeff was a lie. So therefore, Zenaida is a lie and wasn't real. And as we all know, Casey doesn't even have a job. In August of 2007, Casey had a Mexican themed birthday party for Caylee's second birthday. The party was held at her parents' house. Casey was short on money to pay for the cake and decorations. She hadn't been able to steal enough lately, so she took it upon herself to steal a check from her grandma Shirley to cover the rest of the cost. It came out to about $54. However, her grandma said she would have just given her the money had she asked. Cindy had also been finding money missing from her purse on recent occasions. She thought it was George and that he was back to gambling again, but it most likely was Casey. Now we are at the beginning of 2008. That January, Casey took Caylee with her to a house party of a guy named Troy Brown. Casey had met Troy at his birthday party the previous June. This is where she finds her next victim. Her next boyfriend, Ricardo Morales. By February 2008, Casey and Ricardo had started dating. She told Ricardo a different story about who Caylee's father was. She told him it was one of her brother Lee's friends. She said he was from Tennessee and he died in a car accident the night before Caylee's second birthday. Before, she had told people Caylee's dad could have been Eric Baker, Michael Dugan, or Brandon Rogalia. She told so many different names of people. However, they did all die in car accidents. In April of 2008, Casey took $354 from a bank account that her grandparents' Social Security was deposited into. The account was used for her grandfather's expenses at the care facility. However, Casey found it more important to use it to pay her AT&T phone bill. Shirley told the Bank of America to pursue charges. They never did, and neither did she. She did call Cindy and tell her about it. Cindy apologized and offered to repay it, once again not holding Casey accountable for her actions. After Shirley talked to Cindy, she then called her sister Mary Lou and said that Cindy had sounded depressed. They talked about George's gambling problem, among other things. Here is some of what she said to her. Quote, Cindy is in her 50s. Maybe that's part of the depression. So much responsibility getting to be too much for her. I think she had to use her retirement funds to pay bills. Now weekly expenses are so much. She can't add to her 401k, so the company doesn't give you anything if you don't contribute. George's folly before took a lot. Casey spends more than she makes and hence doesn't contribute, but makes more for Cindy to pay. She says that there is a sickness that runs in George's family. Cindy said she had thought of doing away with herself if it wasn't for Caylee, Dad, and me. But with the pressure she's under, even that might not be enough to keep her from harming herself. Casey eventually sent an email to her grandma apologizing for stealing from her and offered to do some cleaning at her house to repay her. Of course, Shirley said no. She wasn't going to risk Casey going through her things while she cleans and stealing from her again. Around this time, George and Cindy had gotten a financial advisor and found out over time Casey had stolen around $40,000 from them. She supposedly had this wonderful new job, so people were starting to wonder why she was having to steal money to pay her bills and buy necessities. She didn't pay rent or anything, so she should have had plenty of money to do whatever she wanted and buy whatever she wanted. George and Cindy had been seeing a therapist for some time to work on their marriage. She told the therapist about how they had found out Casey had stolen from them, and the therapist told them to cut ties with Casey, to stop bailing her out when she gets in trouble, and to stop enabling her. After that advice, Cindy quit going to the therapist. I guess she couldn't handle the truth. George, Cindy, and Shirley weren't the only victims of Casey's. Amy Huizinga, Casey's so-called best friend, had also fallen into the crazy web of lies that Casey spun. For instance, in May 2008, Casey had told Amy that her parents were getting divorced, so they were going to be moving and were signing the house over to her. She asked Amy if she wanted to move in with her, and Amy said yes. It went as far as Amy had put a change of address with the post office, told her current landlord she was moving, and started packing her things. Not sure what Casey's end game was or why she even made up this lie, knowing that in the end, Amy was going to be beyond pissed. At this point, she just lies to be lying. Also in May of 2008, Casey met Tony Lazzaro. If his name sounds familiar, it's because this is who Casey was dating during those 31 days that Caylee was supposedly missing. In the next episode, I will go over those days in detail. So anyway, she met Tony on Facebook and they went to a no clothes party together. It's not a party that you go to naked. Instead, you wear something that is not meant to be an article of clothing. Casey, for example, wore an American flag. I will post the pictures on After Dark's Facebook page. During this time that she started seeing Tony, she technically was still seeing Ricardo also. Tony was from Long Island, New York. He was in Orlando studying music at Full Sail University. At night and on weekends, he worked as a party promoter for local clubs and advertised on social media. He got paid depending on how many people he got to attend the events. For the better part of May and June of 2008, Casey hung out at Tony's with Caylee and they swam in his pool, barbecued, and took Caylee places together. He said Casey was a very attentive mother. And even though he thought Caylee was adorable, he told Casey early on that he didn't think he wanted kids. And if he did end up having any, he wanted boys, not that you get to choose. I'm now going to go over the 16 days leading up to Caylee's disappearance. I know I'm stretching it out, but it's important to know what led to that day. Casey had her new friends to hang out with now, and none of them had kids, so she was getting a taste of the college lifestyle that she could have had if she hadn't gotten pregnant at 19. Tony and his roommates could come and go as they pleased. They didn't have to worry about babysitters as Casey did. Usually George and Cindy would watch Caylee, but they were getting tired of being used and abused by Casey. This annoyed Casey. After all, she was having to cancel plans with her friends because she didn't have a babysitter at the time. Also at this time, Amy still believed she was going to be moving into the Anthony's house with Casey in the next couple of weeks. On June 3rd, Casey messaged Amy and said she was taking her mom to dinner. While they were out and about, Casey told her she found a cool dollar store where they could get essentials for the house cheap. Casey even put this message on Amy's Facebook wall on June 4th. Oh, the times we will have. I can't wait for us to become roomies in another week. Seriously, by the end of this week, it will be just us girls. I can't believe it. I just don't understand the purpose of this story she was telling Amy. When was she going to tell Amy that she is a liar and that she was never going to get the house and that Amy was never moving in? Was she going to wait until Amy had the U-Haul in the driveway? On the evening of June 4th, Casey went to Club Voyage for Troy Brown's birthday. She showed up with Tony, knowing Ricardo would be there. She wanted them to fight over her. She loved the drama and the attention she got from men. Casey always had a boyfriend or was at least dating someone, sometimes more than one at a time. It was like she couldn't function alone. Casey would have usually spent the night at Tony's or Ricardo's, but her mommy had Caylee and told her she needed to come home and take care of her daughter. The next night, everyone went to a strip club and the TGI Fridays, but Casey stayed home that night. On June 6th, Casey had plans with Amy and Ricardo, but she texted Amy at 9:46 p.m. and said she had made a huge mistake by going back to her imaginary job to help set up an event because now she had been roped into staying. She said by the time she got out of there, it would be late and she was already tired, so she was just going to go home. She was supposed to have dinner with Ricardo that night. and she texted him and gave him the same excuse. Where she actually was that night was with Tony at a place called Club Fusion. He ran a lot of promotional events there, and he was running one that night. Casey felt like Tony needed her there to help him. Either Casey wasn't thinking or she just didn't care, or maybe a little of both, because there was a photographer there taking pictures. Several of the pictures were of Casey and Tony. The photographer put them on their professional page, and what does Casey turn around and do? She puts the pictures on her social media page for Amy, Ricardo, and the rest of the world to see. Amy and Ricardo confronted Casey about the pictures and about lying to them and saying she was at work when she was really at the club with her new boyfriend. Casey was already prepared for this confrontation, though, and she had her story ready to go. Casey said when she was at Club Fusion that night that she was on a work mission. She said she was at work setting up the event like she had told them when her boss calls her. He says his daughter is at Club Fusion and he wanted Casey to go check on her and make sure she was okay. She said she was only there for a few minutes and then went back to work. Casey tells lie after lie. She tells lies to cover up lies. I have no idea how she can keep track of them all. I also think most people who were around Casey very much all knew she had a problem, and they probably just let her tell her stories, knowing they were lies, and let it go in one ear and out the other. On Saturday evening, June 8th, Amy totaled her car. Casey took to posting on Amy's Facebook wall and saying, quote, I hope you're okay. Sorry I wasn't there. I'm not sure if Casey had plans with Amy and canceled again, and that's why she said that. I can't find it anywhere in my research. Later that night, Amy was laying on Ricardo's couch. He and Amy were good friends long before he dated Casey. She was staying with him since she gave up her apartment to move in with Casey. Around 11 p.m. that night, Casey showed up at the apartment. She had Caylee with her, and they stayed the night also. While she is at Ricardo's, she complains to Amy that Ricardo is hung up on her and won't leave her alone. Yet she continues to spend the night at his house and lead him on. The next morning, Casey and Caylee left and went home. On June 9th, 2008, Casey says she took Caylee to Zenaida's and went to work. Later on in the evening, she and Caylee went and picked Tony up from the mechanic where his vehicle was getting worked on. The three of them went to Subway and ate after that. Later that night, however, she left Tony at some point because she sent Amy a text that she was going to spend the night at Ricardo's apartment. She also told Amy that Caylee had used the big girl potty that day. Amy showed up at Ricardo's later that evening and spent the night also. The next morning, June 10th, Ricardo and Amy seen Casey and Caylee as they were leaving the apartment. Neither of them ever saw Caylee again. Later that evening, Casey texted Amy and told her she wasn't friends with Ricardo anymore. Here is what she said to Amy. Quote, so Rick and I aren't friends anymore. He finally decided to tell me that he loves me, and unfortunately, I'm not there with him anymore. I waited months for this to happen, and now that it has, I can't say that he is the only guy I have feelings for. It's like I have to choose. He's throwing everything in my face. He wants me to still date him, knowing that I'm starting to like Tony. I can't do that. I'm not that person. I respect him too much to do that. End quote. Once again, Casey is trying to make herself look like the better person, when in fact she was leading Ricardo on the whole time by continually staying at his apartment with him while she was seeing Tony. On Wednesday, June 11th, 2008, Amy and Ricardo went to Club Voyage. Casey was supposed to meet them there, but once again said she had to work. Later that day, she changed her Facebook status to say she was in a relationship with Tony Lazzaro. On Thursday, June 12th, 2008, Casey took Caylee to the Mall of Millennia. Tony was there handing out flyers for a club he was promoting. He met up with them when he was done, and the three of them had lunch at the Cheesecake Factory. After lunch, Casey met up with a friend, Christine Chester. She was a mother also, so they took their kids to the park for a while. Christine said everything seemed normal, and Casey was very attentive and loving towards Caylee when they were there. That night, she was texting with Amy, and at 10:24 p.m., she told Amy she had to make some late night phone calls for work. I couldn't find any information on who those phone calls were actually to, since we know that Casey didn't really have a job. At 11:15 that night, there were some internet searches done on the Anthony's home computer. They were for Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, age 25, Jacksonville. Why was she searching the internet for her supposed nanny? Or was it her parents trying to find out information on the person that was supposedly watching their granddaughter? On Friday, June 13th, Amy texted Casey at 6:15 a.m. Casey had promised to drive Amy to Jacksonville to buy a car, since she had totaled hers. It was a while before Casey responded, but when she did, she told Amy that George had a stroke and she couldn't take her. Amy said, "I understand and I hope he is okay." Here is what she texted Amy. Quote, "He will be. He just gave my mom and I a huge scare. Love you too. I'm glad he's all right. He's stubborn." George never had a stroke. That night, Tony was running a hip hop showcase at Club Fusion, and Casey wasn't going to let her dad's so called stroke interfere with her going to that. She even called Ricardo and invited him. She was trying to get as many people to go as she could. She was spending a lot of time at Fusion because of Tony. In fact, that Friday was her third Friday night in a row at the club, and the owner later said in a statement that he didn't even know Casey had a daughter. Sunday, June 15th, 2008 was Father's Day. Cindy took Caylee to visit her father, Alexander Plezia, at the Advante Nursing Home in Mount Dora, Florida. A lot of people say that Caylee seeing her great-grandfather wasn't for Caylee or even done for Alex, but had everything to do with making Cindy look good. Here is what a witness that day said. Quote, "It had nothing to do with Caylee. Caylee was nothing more than a prop that day. Most people are props to Cindy Anthony." When they left the nursing home, Cindy and Caylee went to Shirley Plezia's house for dinner. Cindy and Shirley discussed Casey's behavior that night. They talked about what they could do to stop the lying and the stealing. Shirley was blaming Cindy for Casey's behavior. She told her she let her get away with those things too long and always covered for her, and that's why now she doesn't think she needs to be held accountable for anything. This is when Cindy told Shirley that she had been secretly looking into the process of getting full custody of Caylee. When Cindy left her mom's that night, she was still worked up about Casey. She knew things had to change because she couldn't take all the lying and manipulating anymore, and it wasn't a good environment for Caylee to be in. One of the reasons Cindy had not confronted Casey on her behavior in the past was because she was scared Casey would take Caylee and George and Cindy would never see her again. That night, however, Cindy was fuming and she was ready to have it out with her daughter. This is what Cindy's brother Rick had this to say about that night. Quote, "They discussed it that evening. They discussed what to do about Casey. So Cindy, according to my mom, left there with a head of steam to confront her." End quote. When Cindy and Caylee got home, George was still at work, but Casey was home. On the evening of the 15th, more than one neighbor reported hearing shouting from the Anthony house. Cindy had printed out photos from Casey's social media. They had been taken at times she was supposed to be at work. Cindy said she wouldn't watch Caylee anymore while Casey was out partying, and then called her an unfit mother. She told Casey to move out, but said she wouldn't take Caylee with her. Lee was home at the time and saw the argument. He said Cindy grabbed Casey around the throat with both hands and tried to choke her. To this day, George and Cindy deny the fight ever happened, even though Lee said he was there and witnessed it. The neighbors heard it, and Jesse Grunn said Casey told him about it. This all leads up to June 16th, 2008, the day Caylee Marie Anthony went missing. In the next episode, we will go over what went on those 31 days that Caylee was so-called missing and the timeline of events that led to Casey's arrest. Check out After Dark's Facebook page for photos from this case. Until next week, stay safe and take care.